Why would they arrest a woman whose hands smelled of motor oil instead of gunpowder? Why drag away someone the town had trusted for years, a neighbor, a mechanic, a friend in handcuffs as if she were a criminal? The answer, at least the one shouted that night in the community center, was simple: stolen valor. Emily Whitefeather didn't resist as the cuffs clicked tight around her wrists. Her pale blue eyes scanned the room, not with fear, but with something else, something unsettled. Veterans, neighbors, her own students from the self-defense class stared back at her, some with anger, others with confusion. "You're no hero," Sergeant Harlan Crow spat, his voice sharp enough to cut the air. "You're a fraud." The words rattled the community like shrapnel. Emily's silence only deepened the mystery. To most of Cedar Rapids, she had always been just the mechanic. The woman in a grease-stained shirt, hair tied back, tattoo of a feather inked along her forearm. She fixed trucks and tractors at cost, or for free when a veteran couldn't pay. She smiled when she handed back keys, but her eyes never smiled. They carried the shadow of a world no one here had ever seen. Now, under fluorescent lights, she stood accused, not just of lying but of impersonating something sacred, a Navy SEAL. Crow, built like an oak but hollowed by bitterness, savored the moment. His voice carried authority in this room full of old soldiers, and he wanted her humiliated. Emily didn't argue, didn't plead. She simply breathed, slow and deliberate, as if counting seconds in her mind. She had counted worse. The cops dragged her out into the night. But the story didn't begin there. That morning, sunlight had filtered through the grimy windows of her small garage on the edge of town. Dust floated in the beams like drifting ghosts. She was under the hood of a Ford pickup, grease streaking her cheek, when Marcus, her 17-year-old apprentice, brought her coffee. "You work too hard," he teased, though admiration clung to every word. Emily had smiled, wiping her hands on a rag so dark with oil it would never be clean again. "Engines don't fix themselves, Marcus. And besides, the day I stop working is the day I stop breathing." He thought she meant it as a joke, but there was truth in her tone, a quiet vow to keep moving forward, no matter the weight she carried. To Marcus, she wasn't just a boss. She was a mystery. He noticed the way she flinched at loud backfires, how sometimes her hands shook when she held certain tools, how she avoided questions about her past with a quick laugh and a change of subject. One afternoon he'd found her alone in the office, staring at nothing, wrench clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Tears slid down her face, silent, stubborn, as though she hated giving them air. "Just tired," she'd said when she realized he was there. But Marcus knew exhaustion didn't leave scars on a person's soul, the way hers seemed etched. At the Veterans Training Academy, the town's converted community center, Emily volunteered twice a week, teaching self-defense. Her movements were precise, almost military in their economy. Every step, every pivot, every takedown looked practiced from years of repetition. Some admired her skill, others whispered. Crow didn't whisper. He sneered from the doorway, arms crossed, tattoos fatting on skin that sagged from too many nights of whiskey. To him, she was a grease monkey playing tough. He had known real war, he said. Real soldiers, men. "She moves like she thinks she's special forces," he told his buddies. "But she's just a half-breed mechanic pretending." Crow's bitterness had roots. Years earlier, he had served as a logistics officer on a classified operation, not at the front but far enough to feel the heat. When that mission failed, his role had been small, his guilt heavy. Men died. He didn't, and it gnawed at him. Emily's competence, her quiet strength, scraped against the raw edges of his insecurity. That night at the community center, she was demonstrating a defensive maneuver when it happened. For a split second, the walls blurred. She wasn't in Iowa anymore. She was in Afghanistan, sand in her teeth, gunfire echoing, her team moving silently under the red haze of dawn. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She blinked hard. And the room returned. Mats on the floor, students watching. But Crow had seen the lapse, the way her body stiffened, the way her eyes clouded. His suspicion sharpened. When class ended, he stepped forward, cutting her off in front of everyone. His voice rose, heavy with contempt. "You know what I think, White Feather." He circled her slowly, predator circling prey. "I think you're a fraud. No woman could know moves like that unless she stole them. YouTube warrior, that's all you are." The room froze. Emily's expression stayed calm. Her body shifted unconsciously into a defensive stance. Years of training she could never admit to. "I've never claimed to be anything more than someone trying to help," she said. Her voice was steady, but inside her chest tightened. Crow sneered. "Funny, I searched every record. No Emily White Feather in the sealed database. No service history, nothing. So which is it? Lying about your name or your skills?" Gasps, murmurs, divisions forming in the crowd. Emily's jaw clenched. But she said nothing. Later, as the fluorescent lights flickered and the crowd shifted uneasily, Sarah Chen, the nurse who never missed a class, spoke up. "She's helped more veterans here than you ever have, Crow. Who cares where she learned?" But Crow's grip on the room was strong. His voice thundered again. "Stolen valor is a crime, and tonight this fraud answers for it." Sirens wailed outside. Emily's stomach dropped, not with fear, but with a weight she knew too well: inevitability. The officers entered, their eyes not on Crow, not on the crowd, but on her. "Emily White Feather." Her answer was a nod. The cuffs snapped around her wrists, cold, familiar. As they pulled her toward the door, she caught Crow's smirk. He leaned close, whispering words that cut deeper than the chains. "I know who you are, and I know why they buried you." Her breath caught, just for a second. Because those words meant one thing: Harlan Crow knew more than he should. At the station, the interrogation room closed in around her. Concrete walls, metal chair biting into her back. The hum of the lights sounded too much like electrical current. She steadied her breathing. Therapy had taught her that. Breathe, count, stay present. Across the table, Detective Martinez opened a folder. "Sergeant Crow claims you've been impersonating military personnel, teaching techniques you couldn't know without training." "I never claimed to be anything," Emily answered. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "I fix cars, I teach people to defend themselves." Detective Thompson leaned forward. "Then explain the scars, the tactics, the interrogation resistance. Explain how a mechanic knows things even soldiers struggle with." Emily's lips parted. For a moment she hesitated. Years of silence pressed against her throat. She had promised never to speak, to stay buried. But something in Crow's smirk, something in Sarah's voice of defense, something in Marcus's hopeful eyes, all of it broke the dam. "My name is Emily White Feather," she said slowly. "Special Operations, Navy SEAL, Operation Thunderbird, Yemen. November 2019, 3 operators killed in action." Her voice faltered. "I was one of them." The detectives exchanged glances. Emily's eyes burned. Her sleeve rolled up. Scars gleamed under the harsh lights, burns, surgical lines, marks no ordinary life could explain. "This is interrogation," she whispered. "This is battlefield triage. These are not the scars of a mechanic." Silence. And then softer, heavier. "They declared me dead. They told me to disappear. But I didn't die. I was buried alive in paperwork and secrecy. And now you're accusing me of fraud." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something more dangerous. With rage. Outside the mirrored glass, Crow watched, his arms crossed, his face tight. He knew she spoke the truth. Because he had been there. And his secret, the one worth millions, the one he had buried with the bodies of her team, was about to surface. But Emily didn't know that yet. Not yet. For now she sat in the interrogation room, shackled, exhausted, bleeding ghosts into the stale air. And somewhere in the shadows, the first cracks of a buried truth began to split open. The kind of truth no one wanted to face. The kind that changes everything. What would you say if someone told you your life never happened? That the battles you fought, the scars you carried, the brothers and sisters you buried, all erased by ink on a piece of government paper. That was the weight pressing against Emily Whitefeather's chest as the detective stared at her, waiting for her to justify the impossible. "I was one of them," she repeated, her voice steadier now though her pulse hammered. "Special Operations, SEAL Team 4, Operation Thunderbird." Detective Thompson leaned back, his skepticism sharp as a blade. "Funny, because our records say Emily Whitefeather never existed in the military. Not a SEAL, not a grunt, not even a cook. So if you were really in Yemen in 2019, why isn't there a trace?" Emily's lips twitched into a bitter smile. "Because someone made sure there wouldn't be. They erased me, signed my death certificate, buried me so deep even my own people thought I was gone." Her eyes lifted to the mirrored glass. She could feel someone watching. Crow. She could almost hear his smug breathing feeding on her pain. But she wasn't speaking to him. She was speaking for herself, for her brothers who never came home. "Check for Operation Thunderbird," she whispered. "The classified file. November 2019. Yemen, 3 operators KIA, 1 ghost left behind." The room grew still. Detective Martinez's fingers tapped rapidly across the laptop keys. For minutes, only the buzz of fluorescent lights filled the silence. Then his brow furrowed. His eyes flicked from the screen to her face, confusion etching his features. "Something here," he muttered. "Fragments, redacted reports, mentions of a unit but the names are scrubbed." Emily nodded once slowly. "Because the mission failed, because someone sold us out, and the price of their betrayal was our silence." Her throat tightened as memory cut through her defenses. The desert night, the ambush, the screams of Morrison and Jackson as they were dragged into darkness, the 43 days of torture that followed, the waterboarding, the electricity, the games that carved invisible scars deeper than any wound on her skin. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "I survived because Jock pulled me out, but survival came with a cost. I came back broken. Nightmares, panic attacks, couldn't even stand fireworks without shaking. And their solution," her laugh cracked with bitterness, "erase me, bury me under lies, tell the world I died so no one had to face what really happened out there." Detective Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Martinez leaned forward, voice quieter now. "If what you're saying is true, why come back here? Why risk exposure?" Emily's gaze softened, distant. "Because I had nowhere else to go. Because I thought maybe in a garage with engines and grease I could piece myself back together. But the ghosts don't stay buried. Not forever." Her words lingered heavy. From behind the glass, Crow's fists clenched. He could feel control slipping, and he hated it.
Yeah.
Minutes later, the interrogation room door burst open. Federal agents swept in, their suits crisp, their faces unreadable, papers slapped onto the table. "She's ours now." Emily's stomach flipped. Federal custody. The same machine that had buried her once was reaching for her again. They pulled her from the chair, cuffed hands gripping her arms as they led her down sterile halls, out into the night, into the back of a waiting black SUV. Crow stood in the parking lot watching her leave. His smirk had faded. In its place, a tightness he couldn't disguise. He knew where they were taking her. He knew who waited on the other end. And for the first time, fear prickled at the edges of his pride.
Yeah.
Hours later, beneath the quiet streets of Des Moines, Emily found herself in a secured underground facility. The room smelled of steel and disinfectant. She sat at a long table, hands free now, though guards lined the walls. At the far end, a man in dress blues entered. His steps were measured, his gaze unwavering. The weight of decades sat on his shoulders, and the metals on his chest glinted beneath harsh light. "Petty Officer White Feather," Admiral Kane said, voice deep, steady, deliberate. "The ghost we created." Emily's jaw clenched. The title hit her like a blow. She hadn't heard it in years. "You know why you're here," Kane continued, sliding a tablet across the table. "Crow stirred up what we buried." Her eyes locked on the files glowing across the screen. Names, dates, fragments of missions blacked out. Evidence of a truth she had lived but never spoken. Her voice came low, sharp. "You mean when you buried me? When you decided one operator's life was worth less than political convenience?" Kane's eyes flickered, just for a second, then he steadied himself. "You weren't the only one buried. The mission was compromised from the inside. Crow was a suspect, but we couldn't prove it." Emily leaned forward, anger flashing. "He was there. He knew details only someone on the inside could know, and now he's using your silence to destroy me." Kane's expression hardened. "We suspected, but without evidence our hands were tied. Crow sold you out for money and we couldn't stop him. We did what we thought was necessary to protect the others." Her breath caught. "Others." Kane's hand tapped the screen. Faces appeared, shadows of men she thought were dead. Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez. Alive. The dam inside her chest cracked wide open. Years of grief, guilt, and isolation tore through her in a rush. "You let me believe they were gone," she whispered, voice breaking. "You left me drowning in nightmares, thinking I was alone." Her hands trembled violently. The walls seemed to close in. Panic roared through her like a storm. "I can't sleep without hearing Morrison scream. I can't shower without feeling the water choke me. I can't trust anyone because anyone could be another betrayer. And you," her voice cracked into a sob, "you erased me instead of helping me survive." For the first time, Admiral Kane's stern facade softened. He leaned forward, his voice quieter, almost human. "You're not forgotten, White Feather. We hid you for the greater good. But the mission isn't over. We're going after everyone involved, and we need you." Emily's chest heaved. Her fists curled tight against the table. Part of her wanted to scream. Part of her wanted to believe him. But beneath it all, one truth gnawed at her. She had trusted before, and it had nearly killed her.
Yeah.
Hours later, in the stillness of the facility, Kane received a message. Encrypted, urgent. He opened the feed. Faces appeared on the screen. Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez. Her team alive. "White Feather," Morrison's voice cracked. "They told us you were dead." Emily's breath stopped. Tears blurred her vision. For 5 years she had mourned them. For 5 years she had carried their ghosts alone. And now here they were, alive, scarred, but breathing. Rodriguez leaned forward, his wheelchair visible in the frame. "I've been tracking Crow for years, building a case. When I saw your arrest, I knew it was time. I have everything. Records, conversations, his handlers. I can prove he betrayed us." Emily's tears fell freely now. Relief and rage crashed together inside her. Relief that her brothers had survived. Rage that she had been abandoned. Kane's voice cut through the moment. "The system won't protect you, Emily, but we will. The question is." His eyes locked on hers. "Will you fight with us again?"
Yeah.
Emily looked at the faces on the screen, at the men she had thought buried forever, at the brothers who had once carried her through fire. Her heart ached, her mind screamed. But beneath it all, one truth rose clear. She was still a warrior. And warriors don't stay buried. What happens when the dead come back to life? Not in body bags, not in coffins, but in the faces of men you once mourned, alive, scarred, breathing. Emily White Feather couldn't speak when she saw them on the encrypted screen. Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez, her brothers, her family, men she had buried 1,000 times in her nightmares. They looked older. Morrison's jaw was harder, lined with pain. Jackson's eyes carried the haunted distance of someone who still woke to phantom gunfire. Rodriguez sat in a wheelchair, his son at his side, but his gaze burned fierce with determination. "White Feather," Morrison's voice broke as he leaned closer. "They told us you were gone." Her lips trembled. Words failed. She had spent 5 years in silence, 5 years screaming into her pillow, 5 years drowning in guilt and grief. And now, suddenly, they were here. She pressed her hand against the table, grounding herself, but her whole body shook. I buried you every night," she whispered. "Every damn night." Morrison's face softened. "And I buried you until now."
The
Rodriguez lifted a flash drive, holding it up like a weapon. "Crow's not just a bitter drunk, he's a traitor. I've been tracking him for 3 years. Conversations, wire transfers, back channels. He sold us out, and I can prove it." Admiral Kane leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Why didn't you bring this sooner, Rodriguez?" The veteran's laugh was hollow. "Because I thought I was the only one left, because I didn't know who to trust. I couldn't go public, not without proof, not without backup. Now I have both." Emily's chest tightened. Proof. The word rang heavy. Proof meant the truth could finally claw its way out of the shadows, but it also meant the nightmare wasn't over. Proof meant war.
The
That night, Emily sat alone in the facility quarters. The walls pressed in. Her hands trembled. The reunion had cracked something open inside her, something she had held shut for years. She pressed her palms to her eyes, but the memories came anyway. Afghanistan, the ambush, the blindfold cutting into her face, the smell of blood and sand. Morrison's voice screaming through the walls, begging her to hold on. The sound of a car battery crackling as wires touched her skin. She gasped, pulling her hands away, fighting the panic. Breathe, count, stay present. But it didn't work, not this time. Her body curled forward, shoulders shaking. She was Emily the mechanic. She was Petty Officer White Feather. She was a prisoner again. "Just stop," she whispered to the ghosts. "Please stop." Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. Her reflection in the dark window stared back at her, hollow, broken, trembling. She hated it. She hated being weak.
the
Hours later, Admiral Kane found her still sitting by the window, eyes red, body rigid. He didn't speak at first. He just stood in the doorway, silent, heavy with the kind of authority that made rooms still themselves. Finally, he said quietly, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Emily's laugh was bitter. "That's what you said last time, and then you buried me." Kane stepped closer. "You're right, we failed you, but now you have a choice. You can disappear again, or you can fight." Her head lifted slowly, her eyes met his. "Fight for what?" Kane's answer came steady. "For truth. For the men who betrayed you. For the brothers who survived. For every warrior who was erased because it was easier for the system to bury their pain than face it." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to curse him for every sleepless night, every panic attack, every pill bottle stacked like trophies of defeat. But instead, she whispered the only word that mattered. "Hell." Kane placed a folder on the table. Inside were surveillance photos, bank transactions, coded emails. Evidence Crow thought he had buried. "We leaked this carefully," Kane said. "Rodriguez's files, your testimony, Morrison and Jackson backing you. It won't just clear your name, it will burn his." Emily's fingers brushed the papers. Her pulse pounded. The evidence was there. The chance at justice was real. But so was the risk. "Crow still has influence," she murmured. "Connections in law enforcement, local press. He'll fight back. He'll turn this on me. Again." Kane's gaze didn't waver. "That's why you need to decide. You stay silent, he wins. You speak, you risk everything. But sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it acts." The words sank deep. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something stir inside her. Not anger, not fear. Resolve.
the
The next morning, the plan began. Rodriguez's evidence was prepared, encrypted drives duplicated, secure channels opened. The media storm Crow had unleashed with her arrest was about to turn back on him. Morrison and Jackson reached out to trusted contacts. Kane arranged quiet allies in Washington. Sarah Chen, the nurse back in Cedar Rapids, rallied local support, organizing veterans who knew Emily not as a fraud, but as the mechanic who had saved their cars, their pride, their dignity. The tide began to shift, and Crow felt it.
Yeah.
In his cluttered home, Crow poured whiskey into a chipped glass, his hands unsteady. The news flickered on his TV. Talking heads debated Emily Whitefeather's arrest, some calling her a disgrace, others questioning Crow's motives. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He answered, voice rough, "Who is this?" A low voice replied, "You should have finished the job, she's alive, and now she's coming for you." The line went dead. Crow's glass shattered against the wall, his chest tightened. For the first time, doubt gnawed at him. He had built his life on lies, convinced the ghosts would stay buried. But ghosts, it seemed, had claws.
Yeah.
Back at the facility, Emily stood before her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her hands hovered near her face, fingers brushing the scars she usually hid beneath sleeves. For years she had seen them as shame, proof of failure, proof of breaking. But now they looked different. Proof she had survived. Proof she was still here. Her breath steadied, her eyes hardened. She whispered to the reflection, "They wanted you gone, but you're still standing."
Yeah.
That evening, as Kane and the team finalized the release of evidence, Emily spoke up. Her voice was calm, but it carried steel. "If we do this, we don't just clear my name. We make sure no one else gets buried like I did. No more ghosts." Morrison nodded, his jaw set. "Then let's finish it."
Yeah.
The next day, the first files hit the media. Financial records, secret communications, the beginnings of a case no one could ignore. Within hours, the story shifted. Emily was no longer just the mechanic accused of stolen valor. She was the woman who might have been erased by betrayal. Hashtag spread, real American hero, first Native SEAL. Veterans across the country shared her story, some with pride, others with outrage at what had been done to her. And Crow. Reporters were at his doorstep before sunset, cameras flashing, questions flying. His denials were clumsy, his rage visible. The walls were closing in.
Yeah.
But Emily knew this wasn't over, not yet. Because men like Crow didn't fall quietly. They clawed, they bit, they tried to drag you down with them. And somewhere deep in her chest, Emily felt the old training stir, the readiness for the fight that was coming. Only this time, it wasn't in a desert halfway across the world. It was here, in the light. What happens when the world finally hears your name, but twisted into something you never were? That was the storm Emily Whitefeather woke into. The news had spread overnight, her face plastered across every major outlet. Mechanic accused of stolen valor, Native American woman arrested for impersonating a Navy SEAL. Clips of her being led away in cuffs ran on repeat. Commentators tore her apart with smug certainty. Some called her a disgrace. Others framed her as unstable, dangerous. Every headline cut like a blade. She had survived bullets, torture, betrayal, but this felt different. This was the kind of execution that didn't need guns, just words.
Yeah.
At the underground facility, Admiral Kane placed the morning papers on the table. His voice was calm, but the tension beneath it was sharp. "This is the counterattack." Crow's lawyers filed injunctions. "They're trying to bury the evidence Rodriguez provided before it can go public." Emily stared at the headlines. Her chest tightened. She felt the old panic press against her ribs, the same panic she had fought in a cell years ago when the walls closed in and air turned thin. Her hand shook, She pressed it flat against the table to steady it. Morrison leaned forward, voice rough but steady. "Let them smear you, truth's still coming. We've got proof. We've got each other, and we've waited long enough to fight back." But Emily's eyes drifted. The room faded. She heard only echoes, Crow's voice calling her a fraud, the crowd's silence, the cuffs snapping shut. Her throat closed. "I caw," she whispered. Everyone turned. Her breath came fast, shallow. "I can't breathe when the whole world's watching. I can fight in the dark, I can bleed in silence, but this," she pressed her fist against her chest, "this is different. They're ripping away the only thing I had left, my name." Kane's voice cut through the spiral. "That's why you don't fight this alone."
Yeah.
Hours later, Sarah Chen stood at a podium outside the Cedar Rapids Community Center. Dozens of veterans, locals, and reporters filled the space. "Emily Whitefeather is not a fraud," Sarah declared, her voice firm. "She is a survivor. She is a teacher. She has given more to this community than those who try to tear her down. And if you doubt her, look into her eyes. Those are not the eyes of a liar. Those are the eyes of someone who has seen more than most of us could survive." Her words rippled outward. Veterans who had trained with Emily shared their stories online. Mechanics who had worked alongside her posted photos. Marcus, her apprentice, recorded a shaky video on his phone, saying, "She saved me when I had nothing. She's real, whatever they say." For every voice against her, another rose in her defense. But Crow wasn't done.
Yeah.
At a press conference of his own, Crow stood before cameras in a polished suit, hair slicked back, his chest puffed with false pride. "She is lying," he thundered. "There are no records, no proof. She's spinning stories for sympathy, and the so-called evidence being spread, fabricated, stolen. Do not be fooled by a fraud who insults every real warrior's sacrifice." He played his part well. The grieving veteran betrayed by an impostor, the righteous accuser defending the honor of the fallen. The crowd ate it up. And Emily watched from the facility, her stomach twisting. Every word he spoke was another blade carving her apart.
Yeah.
That night sleep betrayed her. She woke gasping, sweat soaking her sheets. The dream was always the same. The cell, the blindfold, the water choking her lungs. Morrison's scream. Her own voice breaking as she gave false intel just to make the pain stop. Shame, guilt, weakness. She stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the sink until her knuckles blanched. She stared into the mirror, her reflection fractured by tears. "You're not a fraud," she whispered to herself. "You're not." But deep inside, doubt whispered louder.
Yeah.
By dawn, Admiral Kane found her sitting on the edge of her bed, eyes hollow. "You're breaking," he said softly. Her jaw clenched. "I've already been broken." Kane studied her, then spoke with a rare gentleness. "Do you know why I fought to keep your name classified? Not to erase you, to protect you. You were the first, the one who proved it could be done. They feared you would become a symbol, and they were right, because now you are." Emily looked up, her eyes blazing through exhaustion. A symbol doesn't shake in the dark. A symbol doesn't wake screaming. Kane nodded once. "No, but a symbol doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be true."
Yeah.
The next 48 hours became a battlefield without bullets. Videos of Emily's arrest clashed against testimonials from veterans she had trained. Rodriguez's files leaked piece by piece across encrypted channels. Hashtags trended. #she is real, still standing. Crow fought harder. His lawyers filed defamation suits. He hired PR firms to flood the airwaves with doubt. But the cracks in his armor widened. Rodriguez's flash drive carried more than documents. It carried voices, recorded calls, conversations where Crow slipped, where his greed outweighed his caution. The first clip hit social media at midnight. Crow's voice, unmistakable, saying, "She won't talk. She thinks she's dead. That's the deal." By morning, the country was listening.
Yeah.
Emily stood in the command center, screens glowing with headlines, feeds, scrolling chaos. Her heart pounded as she watched her name change shape. From fraud to survivor to warrior. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. It's happening, he's falling. But Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, not fast enough. Because she knew Crow, she knew men like him. Cornered animals didn't surrender, they struck.
Yeah.
She was right. That evening, as she prepared to speak publicly for the first time, an encrypted message flashed across Kane's desk. 4 words. She dies or we do. Kane read it twice, his jaw tightening. He looked at Emily, who stood straight despite the weight pressing down on her. Crow's handlers won't let you walk free, he said. You're more dangerous alive than dead. Emily nodded once, calm, almost too calm. I know.
Yeah.
The cameras were waiting. Her face had already been torn apart in headlines. Her silence had been called guilt. Her past had been questioned. Now it was her turn to speak. She stepped onto the stage, the lights hot, the microphones lined up like weapons. The crowd hushed. Reporters leaned forward. Her hands trembled once. She hid them against the podium. My name is Emily Whitefeather, she began, her voice low, steady. For 5 years I've been buried, not in the ground, in paperwork, in lies, in silence. The crowd leaned closer. I was a Navy SEAL, Operation Thunderbird. Yemen, 2019. We were betrayed, we were captured. Some of us didn't make it out. Some of us were hidden, and they declared me dead. Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. I am not a fraud. I am not a thief of valor. I am a survivor, and I am not alone. Screens behind her lit up with faces. Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But in that storm of sound, Emily stood silent, her chest rising with a breath that felt like the first in years. For the first time since the cell, she didn't feel buried. She felt seen. What happens when the truth you fought to hide becomes the truth the whole world demands? Emily Whitefeather had stood before the cameras, her voice shaking but unbroken, and for the first time the silence around her cracked wide open. The world had seen her. The world had listened. But now the world wanted more.
Yeah.
The morning after her speech, Emily sat in a small, dim-lit room at the facility, staring at the flood of messages on Kane's monitor. Thousands of veterans posting her words, families thanking her, strangers calling her a hero. But alongside the praise came venom, accusations, death threats, old enemies resurfacing. She scrolled past one message that froze her blood. Crow was right. You're not a warrior, you're broken, and broken things should stay buried. Her fingers tightened around the mouse. The words blurred. She pushed the monitor away, her throat tight, her breath uneven. Because the cruelest part was that the message echoed the very words she whispered to herself in the dark.
Yeah.
Across town, Crow's fortress of lies was crumbling. The recordings Rodriguez had released spread like wildfire. His voice, his betrayal, his dealings with handlers, all of it exposed. The man who had accused Emily of fraud was now the accused, his face splashed across screens as traitor, profiteer, liar. But Crow was not finished. He slammed his fist against the table in his lawyer's office, veins bulging at his temples. They think they can destroy me. She thinks she can crawl back from the grave and take me down. No, no, I'll bury her again. His lawyer shifted uneasily. The evidence is damning. It's only a matter of time before federal charges stick. The press has turned. Public opinion. I don't care about opinion, Crow roared. This isn't about law or truth. This is about power, and I still have friends in places that matter. His eyes darkened, his voice lowered. If she walks free, I don't.
Yeah.
At the facility, Emily trained alone in the gym. Sweat soaked her shirt as she moved through drills, strikes, blocks, takedowns, her body running on muscle memory while her mind spiraled. Every slam of her fist against the bag carried the weight of doubt. Every pivot carried anger. Every breath was a battle against the shadows whispering she was still that prisoner, still that ghost. Morrison entered quietly, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You don't have to fight ghosts every night, you know." Her fist froze mid-swing. She turned slowly, her face damp, her eyes fierce. "And if I stop what's left, I don't know how to be anything else." Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're not just the woman who survived torture. You're not just the soldier they erased. You're the one who's still standing. That means something, to me, to Jackson, to Rodriguez, to every kid who looks at you and sees proof they can get back up too." Emily's throat tightened. She looked away, blinking back the sting in her eyes. "Then why does it still feel like I'm broken?" Morrison's voice softened. "Because you are, we all are. That's what surviving does, but broken doesn't mean useless. Broken can still fight. Broken can still matter."
Yeah.
That evening, Kane gathered the team around the table. Rodriguez joined via video link, his son adjusting the camera. Jackson leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Kane's tone was grim. "Crow's allies are fighting back. They've planted stories discrediting Rodriguez, questioning your mental health, even trying to suggest this is some elaborate conspiracy. The more truth we push out, the louder the lies get." Emily exhaled slowly. "So it comes down to who people believe." Kane nodded. "And that's dangerous, because if the system can't decide, Crow may not wait. He's desperate, and desperate men are unpredictable." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakers. "He's not just desperate, he's scared, and when men like him get scared, they lash out." Emily's eyes narrowed. "At me." Kane didn't deny it.
Yeah.
The first attack came the next night. Emily returned to her quarters after a long debriefing. The hallway was empty, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing overhead. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and froze. The window was open, curtains shifting in the cold air. Her instincts flared. Her hand moved to the knife strapped at her ankle. And then she saw it. A feather lying on her bed. Her feather, the same tribal emblem she carried on her forearm. Her stomach dropped. Someone had been here. Someone close. She gripped the knife tighter, her chest heaving. For years she had fought to convince herself the shadows weren't watching. Now they were.
Yeah.
Kane's team swept the room but found nothing. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, just the feather, a message. Emily sat on the edge of her bed as they worked, her hands trembling, her throat tight. "They're not going to wait for a courtroom," she whispered. "They're coming for me." Kane stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "Then we stay ready, because the truth is bigger than you now, bigger than any of us. If they silence you, they silence everyone like you." Her eyes lifted, filled with quiet fire. "Then let them try."
Yeah.
But even fire flickers. That night she woke screaming. The sound of the feather hitting her sheets had carried her back to the cell, back to the ropes digging into her wrists, back to the interrogator who told her she was nothing, no one, already forgotten. Her own voice echoed in the dark. Broken things should stay buried. She pressed her hands against her ears, rocking, whispering again and again, "Not broken, not buried, not broken, not buried."
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Crow made his move. In a private meeting room 2 states away, he sat with 2 men in suits. Their faces were calm, their words colder than stone. "She is destabilizing the system," one said. "If she proves her case, others will come forward. We can't afford that." Crow leaned forward, his voice low, eager. "Then you give me what I need, resources, silence, cover, and I'll make sure she never speaks again." The man nodded slowly. "For your sake, Crow, she better not."
Yeah.
Back in Cedar Rapids, Sarah Chen organized a rally outside the community center. Hundreds gathered holding signs. She is real. She is ours, still standing. Marcus stood on a crate, shouting into a microphone. She gave us hope when no one else did. She's not a fraud, she's proof. Proof that even when the world breaks you, you can rise again. The crowd roared. And somewhere, watching from the edge, Crow's eyes narrowed.
The
At the facility, Emily watched live feeds of the rally. Her chest swelled, but fear gnawed at her too. Every cheer felt like a target painted on her back. She whispered under her breath, almost a prayer, "Please don't let them pay the price for me." Morrison entered, his voice steady. "They're not paying for you, they're standing with you. There's a difference." Emily nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the screen.
the
But deep inside, she knew what was coming. Crow wasn't done. The feather on her bed had been a warning. The real strike was still ahead. And this time, it wouldn't just be her name on the line. How far will a man go to keep his sins buried? Emily Whitefeather found the answer the hard way.
the
2 nights after the feather appeared on her bed, the facility alarms shattered the silence. Sirens wailed, red lights pulsed down concrete halls, and boots thundered on the floor. Emily jolted awake, heart slamming in her chest. She grabbed the pistol from her nightstand, instincts kicking in before thought. Morrison burst into the room, weapon drawn. "We're compromised, move." Emily didn't ask, she followed. Her bare feet pounded the cold floor, her breath ragged. The hall shook with distant blasts, not bombs, but doors forced open, walls breached. Crow hadn't just sent a message, he had sent men.
the
They fought through the facility's corridors, gunfire cracking, shouting echoing off steel. Emily's hands were steady, her shots precise, the old training alive in her muscles. But inside she was trembling, not from fear of bullets, from fear of the cell, from fear of capture. Every scream, every flash of light dragged her back to that place. Rope, darkness, electricity. "Stay with me." Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. He shoved her into cover as rounds ricocheted down the hall. Emily exhaled hard, forcing her mind into the present. Not there, here, not then, now. She rose, returned fire, dropped one attacker, then another. Her body remembered. Her body obeyed. But her mind whispered, "They'll take you again. They'll break you again."
the
When the smoke cleared, Kane's team secured the breach. 3 attackers dead, 2 captured. All mercenaries, deniable, disposable. The kind of men Crow could hire through the shadows. Emily stood among the chaos, chest heaving, guns still raised. Her hands trembled now that the shooting had stopped. Kane approached, his expression grim. "This isn't intimidation anymore, it's elimination. They won't stop until you're gone." Emily lowered her weapon slowly, her voice raw. "Then I should have stayed buried." Kane's eyes hardened. "Don't you dare, that's exactly what Crow wants." She turned away, but Morrison stepped into her path. His voice was softer. "You're not fighting for yourself anymore, Whitefeather. You're fighting for all of us, for everyone who never got to speak." Her lips parted, her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but the truth in his words cut deeper than the fear.
the
The next day, Emily received worse news. Sarah Chen had been attacked leaving the community center. Not killed, but beaten badly enough to send her to the hospital. The message was clear. Anyone standing with Emily was a target. Emily's chest clenched as she sat at Sarah's bedside, the nurse's face swollen, bruised, stitched. "You can't keep doing this," Emily whispered, tears burning her eyes. "They're coming after you because of me." Sarah shook her head, her voice faint but firm. "No, they're coming after me because I believe you, because I won't let them erase you. That's not your burden, that's my choice." Emily's tears spilled. She pressed her forehead to Sarah's hand. "I don't deserve that." Sarah's grip tightened, weak but steady. "Yes, you do, you all do. Broken doesn't mean undeserving." The words struck like lightning. Broken doesn't mean undeserving.
the
Outside the hospital, reporters swarmed. Microphones shoved forward, questions fired like bullets. Emily, are you responsible for the violence spreading here? Do you regret speaking out? Are you really a SEAL, or just another fraud hiding behind sympathy? Her breath caught, the panic pressed in again. The noise, the eyes, the accusations. She froze. Morrison shoved through the crowd, shielding her, his voice barking. Back off, she's done talking. But Emily's silence screamed louder than words. The world saw her tremble. The headlines wrote themselves. The shaky truth of Emily Whitefeather.
Yeah.
That night she locked herself in her quarters. The walls felt closer than ever. She slid to the floor, knees pulled to her chest, breath sharp and shallow. The memory of Sarah's bruised face haunted her. The sound of reporters' voices rang in her skull. The feather on her bed glowed in her mind like a curse. Her whisper was broken. I can't do this, I can't. She pressed her palms against her temples, rocking, drowning in the voices that told her she was weak, useless, a fraud. Her hand drifted toward the drawer where the pills lay, white capsules lined up in a bottle, the quick escape, the silence she sometimes longed for. Her fingers closed around it. But then she saw it. On her desk, the Thunderbird emblem she had carved years ago, her tribe's symbol, her father's gift. She stared at it, breath ragged. Her father's voice echoed in memory. The Thunderbird rises from storms. Even when lightning breaks the sky, it flies. That's who you are. Her hand loosened. The pill bottle dropped to the floor, rolling away. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I'm still here. I'm still standing.
Yeah.
The following morning, Kane addressed the team. His tone was colder than steel. They won't stop. Crow's handlers have resources, networks, protection. They've survived by burying ghosts like you. If we want to finish this, we can't play defense anymore. We take the fight to them. Emily's eyes lifted, rimmed with exhaustion but burning with fire. Then let's end it. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the feed. I've tracked one of Crow's handlers to Chicago, a fixer. If we pull him, we get the chain, and we get Crow. Kane nodded. It's dangerous, off books, no backup if it goes wrong. Emily didn't hesitate. That's the only kind of fight I know.
Yeah.
That night, Emily sat alone, loading her gear with steady hands. Each click of a magazine, each strap tightened, felt like pieces of herself snapping back into place. For years, she had tried to be just a mechanic, just a quiet woman in a garage, but the truth was undeniable. She was a warrior. And warriors don't run.
Yeah.
Before leaving, she visited Sarah one last time. The nurse smiled weakly, her face still marked by bruises. Emily squeezed her hand. I'll come back. Sarah's eyes glistened. And when you do, you teach them. Teach every veteran who thinks silence is strength. Teach them that asking for help doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive. Emily nodded, her chest tight with emotion. Because she knew Sarah was right.
Yeah.
Hours later, Emily climbed into the black SUV with Morrison and Jackson. The city lights of Chicago awaited. The hunt had begun. Crow thought he had buried her. But the storm was coming for him now. And Emily Whitefeather was its center. What do you do when the ghosts you've been running from finally stand in front of you in flesh and blood? Emily Whitefeather sat in the back of the black SUV, city lights streaking across the windows as Chicago's skyline rose like jagged steel teeth. Morrison drove, silent, his jaw locked tight. Jackson rode shotgun, scanning every street like the old days, restless, precise, ready. Rodriguez's voice crackled in her earpiece from Arizona, calm but firm. Target's name is Victor Hale, former intelligence contractor, now fixer for hire, Crow's middleman. He launders money, arranges protection, cleans up messes. If we pull him, we pull Crow's safety net. Emily's fingers tightened around the pistol in her lap. Location: warehouse near the river. Security's light but not sloppy. 2 cars outside. He's inside meeting with someone. You won't get another chance. Kane's voice came over the channel, deep and steady. Remember, alive if possible. Dead and we lose the trail. Emily exhaled slowly. Alive. She wasn't sure she trusted herself with that condition.
Yeah.
The SUV stopped in the shadows of a crumbling block, the hum of the city a constant cover. Emily pulled on her jacket, checked her weapon one last time, and nodded. Morrison's eyes met hers. We go quiet until we can't. Jackson smirked faintly, the kind of grin that masked nerves. Been a while since we kicked indoors together. Emily forced a breath. Let's make it count.
Yeah.
The warehouse loomed ahead, rust and steel, windows dark. They moved like shadows themselves, slipping through side entrances, every step measured. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust, crates stacked high. A dim light glowed from an office above the floor. Voices murmured. Emily signaled, and they crept closer. Through the glass, she saw him, Victor Hale. Sharp suit, thinning hair, smug confidence of a man who thought he was untouchable. Across from him, a younger man in a leather jacket passed a briefcase across the desk. Hale opened it. Stacks of bills gleamed under the light. Emily's pulse quickened. Blood money. Crow's lifeline.
Yeah.
She gave the signal. They moved. Jackson cut power to the building. Darkness swallowed the warehouse. Shouts erupted from the office. Emily and Morrison breached the stairs, weapons raised. The office door slammed open. Hale stumbled out, flashlight beam shaking. Federal raid, Morrison barked, his voice thunderous, calculated. Hale froze. His eyes darted between the shadows, confusion twisting to panic. Emily stepped forward, her weapon leveled, her voice cold as ice. Victor Hale, sit down. The flashlight found her face. Recognition flickered in his eyes. His lips curled into a smirk. Well, the ghost herself, Emily Whitefeather. I heard you were supposed to stay dead. Her jaw clenched. You should have left me that way.
Yeah.
He didn't obey. He laughed. A slow, mocking laugh that echoed through the steel walls. You think this changes anything? Crow isn't just one man, he's a system. He's built into everything. You tear me down, another replaces me. You expose him, you expose yourselves. Emily stepped closer, the muzzle of her pistol inches from his chest. Then maybe I start with you. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The room blurred. For a heartbeat, she wasn't in Chicago anymore. She was back in Yemen, blindfolded, bound. Hale's mocking tone became the voice of her interrogator. You're already dead. No one's coming. You'll disappear like the rest. Her breath caught, her vision tunneled. She wanted to pull the trigger. She wanted to erase him. But Morrison's hand gripped her arm. Emily, not like this. Her eyes flicked to him. His gaze was steady, pleading. We need him alive. Don't let them turn you into what they said you were. Her chest heaved, the pistol shook. Finally, with a trembling exhale, she lowered it.
Yeah.
Hale was secured, zip ties biting into his wrists, tape across his mouth. They dragged him down the stairs, through the darkened warehouse, into the SUV. As the city lights sped past, Emily stared at him in the backseat. Every part of her screamed to end him, to silence the smug smirk that still lingered in his eyes. But another voice whispered louder. Justice isn't vengeance. Justice is truth.
Yeah.
Back at the facility, Hale broke quickly under pressure. Kane sat across the table, his presence heavy, while Emily stood in the corner, arms crossed, her silence sharper than any threat. The fixer spilled everything. The payments, the handlers, the orders, Crow's betrayal. And then he said it. Crow didn't just sell out Operation Thunderbird. He's still selling. Missions, names, operators. Every leak in the last 5 years, his fingerprints are on it. Emily's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about her team anymore. This was about every warrior who trusted the system, every mission compromised, every operator betrayed. Crow wasn't just her enemy. He was everyone's.
Yeah.
After the interrogation, Emily found herself alone in the hall, leaning against the cold wall, her hands trembling. Morrison joined her, quiet at first, then softly, "You wanted to kill him, didn't you?" Her throat tightened, "More than I've ever wanted anything." "And you didn't." She met his eyes, voice breaking. "It scared me, how close I came, how much I wanted it." Morrison nodded slowly. "That's what makes you different from them. You wanted it, but you didn't take it. That's what keeps you human." Her tears blurred the hall lights. She let out a shaky laugh. "Being human hurts like hell." "Yeah," Morrison said softly, "but it means you're still you."
Yeah.
That night Emily couldn't sleep. She stood at the window, watching the Iowa sky, stars faint through the haze. She whispered to the glass as if to her ghosts, "I didn't kill him, but I wanted to, and I don't know what that makes me." The silence answered with its own truth. Survivor.
Yeah.
The next morning, Kane laid out the new reality. Hale's confession was on record. The trail led straight to Crow. The system could no longer pretend ignorance. But Crow still had allies, still had teeth, and now, cornered, he was more dangerous than ever. Kane's voice was low, resolute. "We move fast, we move hard, we finish this before he finishes you." Emily's hand pressed against the Thunderbird emblem on her forearm. Her heart hammered. For years she had been the ghost, the buried, the erased. But now the storm was almost here. And when it broke, either Crow would fall. Or she would. How does a ghost return to the living? By tearing down the man who tried to erase her. Emily Whitefeather knew it had to end. Not in whispers, not in shadows, but in daylight.
Yeah.
The trail from Victor Hale's confession spread like wildfire. Bank records, coded transmissions, contracts signed in invisible ink. Every path led to one man, Sergeant Harlan Crow. Kane's team moved quickly. Rodriguez uploaded files to encrypted servers, releasing them in waves. Jackson coordinated with trusted reporters. Morrison prepared the team for fallout. Emily, she prepared herself, not for battle, for exposure. Because this time, the fight wasn't with rifles in the dark. It was with truth in the open.
Yeah.
Crow still tried to spin it. At his press conference, he stood stiff in a tailored suit, sweat glistening at his temple. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. "I am not a traitor," he boomed, voice strained. "I am a patriot. This so-called evidence, lies, fabrications by enemies who want to destroy the reputation of a veteran. And Emily Whitefeather," he sneered. "She is still nothing, still no one. A broken woman spinning fairy tales." But his words faltered as the screens behind him lit up. Rodriguez's recordings, Hale's testimony, bank transfers, and then the faces. Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez himself. And finally, Emily. Her image appeared, scars visible, eyes burning. Her voice filled the room, pre-recorded but steady. "You buried me. You called me a fraud, but I survived, and I am not alone." Crow's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came. The reporters turned, their questions now knives. "What about these payments, Sergeant Crow? Why did your name appear in Hale's records? Did you betray your own team?" Crow stammered, sweat dripping down his collar. His denials cracked under the weight of proof. And then the doors burst open. Federal agents flooded the room. "Harlan Crow, you are under arrest for treason and espionage." Cameras captured it all, his hands twisted behind his back, his face contorted with rage and fear. The man who tried to bury her was dragged away in chains.
Yeah.
Emily watched it unfold on the monitors in Kane's facility. Her breath came shallow, her heart pounding. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's over." But Emily shook her head. "No, it's not over, not for me." Because Crow and chains didn't erase the cell, Didn't erase the nights she woke screaming. Didn't erase Sarah's bruised face, or the pills on her nightstand, or the years she had lived as a ghost. Justice was real, but healing, that was still a war.
Liang,
Days later, Emily stood again at the Cedar Rapids Community Center. No cuffs this time, no accusations, just silence as veterans and townspeople filled the room, waiting. She stepped forward, her scars uncovered, her voice steady. I was buried once, not in the ground but in silence, in shame, in a system that told me I was easier forgotten than remembered, and I believed it. I believed I was broken. I believed I was no one. Her eyes swept the room, faces leaned in. But broken doesn't mean useless. Broken doesn't mean weak. Broken means you survived something that should have ended you and you're still standing. She paused, her breath catching. I am Emily Whitefeather, mechanic, teacher, Navy SEAL, survivor, and I'm still here. The room erupted. Applause, cheers, tears in the eyes of veterans who had hidden their own scars, families who had carried invisible burdens. Sarah, her face still healing, stood at the back, clapping slowly, her eyes bright with pride. Emily's chest swelled, but her voice lowered again, softer, more intimate. And to every warrior who hears me, the battle doesn't end when you come home. The demons follow. The silence suffocates, but you are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are still a warrior.
Liang,
The words rippled outward, online, across the country. Veterans posted their own scars. Families spoke their truths. Support groups filled. The phrase "still standing, still fighting" became a rallying cry. Emily had been erased. Now she was impossible to ignore.
Liang,
Weeks later, the garage buzzed again. Engines rumbling, tools clattering. But this time, Emily wasn't just fixing cars. She was teaching veterans side by side with Marcus, showing them not just how to defend themselves, but how to face their wounds. Real strength, she told them, isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every time you do, and asking for help when the weight's too heavy. Her students nodded, some with tears in their eyes, some with hope flickering for the first time in years.
Liang,
At dusk, Morrison, Jackson, and Rodriguez arrived. They stood among the oil stains and tool racks, their laughter rough but real. Kane joined them, his presence still sharp but softened by pride. He placed a folder on her workbench. We're forming a new unit, ghost operators, deniable, off the books. Men and women who can't be traced because the world already thinks they're gone. We need you, all of you. Morrison grinned. Guess the old team's back together. Emily looked at the folder, then at the men beside her, scarred, broken, still standing. She smiled faintly. When do we start?
Liang,
That night, Emily walked alone to her truck, the Iowa sunset painting the sky in fire. She paused, her reflection glinting faintly in the glass. Not just the mechanic, not just the soldier, but the survivor, the ghost who refused to stay buried. She whispered to the fading light, a promise to herself and to every warrior who carried unseen scars. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.
Liang,
And in the shadows beyond the horizon, 4 ghosts prepared to rise again.